Hi, my name is Whyte, and I'm in love with hitchhiking. I know that's kind of a weird thing to be proud of. Most people think of hitchhiking as reckless at best and deadly at most, and the practice has a terrible reputation.
Let's take the case of Jimmy Barnes. He didn't feel like walking home, so he decided to thumb a ride. What Jimmy didn't know was that Ralph was sick. You see, Ralph was a homosexual.
But that hasn't been my experience in the least. In fact, after hundreds of days spent hitchhiking over the last 20 years, I found the risks to be greatly overinflated and the benefits to be almost criminally underestimated. Hitchhiking is about trust and understanding. It's like this recalibration of your perspectives through heavy doses of cultural exposure, awe, and epiphany administered while riding shotgun into the unknown. And at a time in history when distrust and division have poisoned discourse to the point of despair, I want more people to know that. So much so that I decided to quit my job and start this channel, in the hopes that I might be able to convince some other people to go hitchhiking too. Or, at the very least, to seek out the benefits it provides elsewhere. Over the next few months, I'm going to hitchhike the entirety of the United States southern border with a camera and a microphone, interviewing anyone that picks me up in pursuit of capturing the experience on film. I'll edit and publish that footage into a series of videos, like chapters in a book titled American Awe. This video can be thought of as a prologue to that book, in which I lay the groundwork for what's to come, sort of the why before the what. And in order to do that, I need to tell you another hitchhiking story, one that began 2 decades ago, when I spent 20% of my life savings on a Sony Handycam, boarded a one-way flight to Anchorage, Alaska, and disappeared into the wilderness alone. And that story begins way up here. This is me at age 21. If I look scared, it's because I am. The date is September 2nd, 2005. 2 weeks since Hurricane Katrina struck New Orleans. 2 hours before Kanye West will proclaim,
"George Bush doesn't care about black people."
And 2 days after I arrived in the Alaskan Arctic and started hitchhiking south towards Argentina. What I remember most about the start of this trip wasn't so much the excitement, but the fear, the weight of it all, the unknown, the isolation. I remember the French tourist I let film me jumping into the Arctic Ocean, who then attempted to fondle me in the back of his rented Buick Rendezvous as we bunked together surrounded by bears on an isolated road in the Arctic tundra. I remember the loneliness of nights alone on the side of the road and the relentless efforts of black flies in the Yukon Territory. And I remember the British Columbian man who picked me up and then refused to speak a word, opening his mouth only to silently cackle, convincing me I'd soon end up a rug on the floor of his cabin. But honestly, those interactions were outliers. What I remember most is the generosity of 99% of the people who picked me up. Hitchhiking requires this paradoxical combination of total self-sufficiency and total dependence on strangers. Upon sticking their thumb out, one feels exposed, seen. Drivers stare at you, they judge you, honk at you, even swerve at you. Sometimes car after car after car drives by, chipping away at your resilience like waves chipping away at a rocky shore. Nonetheless, without fail, eventually someone pulls over, and that's when the adrenaline kicks in. Running towards the vehicle, you try to assess what you can. The driver rolls down their window and you have 5 to 15 seconds at most to assess the situation, to embrace your faith in humanity before committing to opening the door and climbing inside. The door shuts and wham! It's like stepping into a new dimension. You're suddenly racing at high speed, trapped inside the bubble of some stranger's life. I have this hunch that people with something weighing on their chest are subconsciously drawn to picking up hitchhikers, drawn to the opportunity of talking privately, one-on-one with someone they'll never see again. I've had countless conversations about the meaning of life with drivers, about God and death, about relationship problems, dreams and regrets. Drivers share sage advice, political views, and secrets from their past. Within minutes, a connection begins to build, as if a whole new world opens up, a safe place with only the two of you in it. This process repeated day in, day out, over and over again, it changes you. It opens you up. Traveling south from Alaska into the Yukon, I began to feel at home on the road, at home walking for hours without a ride, while being on display, at home with rejection, and with the wild freedom of the open road. Over countless rides with countless strangers and countless nights camped in countless places, the weight of all that fear I'd once felt began to lift. I traveled through Washington, Oregon,
4 miles south of Lincoln City,
and California, before linking up with childhood friends John and Jed to circle the central US. From hurricane-ravaged Louisiana,
I am sending Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and terrible day of the Lord, and he will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children and the hearts of the children to the fathers, lest I come and strike the earth with doom. And I am that prophet. I am Elijah the prophet.
through Texas,
Fort Lauderdale is about 80% niggers. And they're worthless.
Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming, across to Indiana in a single ride, and down through Kentucky, Tennessee, and Alabama. By the time John and I crossed the border to start hitchhiking south down the Pacific coast of Mexico, I'd begun to perceive this inner sense of freedom replacing my fear, a resilience born of submission to fate, to the universe, to the leap of faith I made every time I climbed into a stranger's car. I felt at peace. I felt connected to the world. The further we traveled into Guatemala, Belize, El Salvador, and Honduras, the stronger this sensation became. Until one day, after John and I negotiated travel into La Mosquitia rainforest on a fishing boat manned by smugglers, I understood the root of this sensation: acceptance. I hadn't replaced my fear. I'd learned to sit with it, to see it, and to accept that which was beyond my control. By the time we disembarked the boat into the jungle, we were almost completely out of money. It took 4 days to exit La Mosquitia and cross Nicaragua, capped off by a grueling overnight journey fighting through rainstorms on the roof of a bus. But as the sun rose that next morning, I recall this feeling of weightlessness. I had this pervasive thought: this must be what it means to feel truly free. I'm going to pause here for a second because I want to drill down on something. I didn't realize it at the time, but at the root of this sense of acceptance, freedom, and connectedness I felt was likely a single emotion: awe. The science behind awe is a young but promising field, at the heart of which you'll find the work of Dr. Keltner and Jonathan Haidt. In his 2023 book on the subject, Keltner defined awe as the feeling of being in the presence of something vast that transcends your current understanding of the world. In a state of awe, he writes, we experience a shrinking of the self. We see ourselves less as individuals and more as members of complex, integrated systems shaped by vast forces beyond our control. Correspondingly, empathy tends to increase and racist tendencies tend to decrease. Awe leads to spiritual awakenings and profound epiphanies. It quiets the voice in your head and lowers stress, anxiety, and depression. I came to realize that hitchhiking provokes awe on a near daily basis. It reignites your passion for life and living. But that's not all that it does. To understand hitchhiking's greatest gift, we need to turn from the work of Keltner to the work of Haidt. In 2012, Haidt published a book on moral psychology asking, why is it that in matters of morality like politics and religion, well-meaning, intelligent people can disagree so fervently? Why can, for instance, equally educated people watch the same YouTube video and draw such different conclusions? The answer, research shows, is that people rarely reason their way to moral conclusions. They intuit them first, and then use reason to justify what they already feel. We like to think of ourselves as rational, but in matters of morality, decisions generally come from a gut sense of right and wrong, shaped by the groups we identify with, like family, friends, heritage, race, or nationality. The rational mind just spins the story and ties up loose ends. But in a state of awe, Haidt suggests, we can break free from those ingrained patterns. And this is hitchhiking's great secret. By placing strangers together in a vulnerable, awe-evoking, and temporal relationship, a bond often forms, a sense of connection, of trust, and of understanding. even when their moral compasses couldn't be further apart. And all this brings us back to where we started, to the purpose of this video series, American Awe. If awe can open us up to new ways of seeing the world, and if hitchhiking can evoke awe while forcing us to engage directly with strangers, perhaps, in these times of growing division and distrust, the world could benefit from more hitchhiking. Or, at the very least, could benefit from seeing how an increase in experiences like hitchhiking could improve our lives. So that's exactly what I'm going to try and do. I'm inviting you to join me on a hitchhiking journey to investigate the reasons behind our increased distrust, disconnection, and despair, and hopefully to learn what we can do to combat them. That's the idea anyway. At the very least, it should make for a good story. I'll be hitting the road in the next few days, so keep an eye out for updates here on this channel, and on Instagram and TikTok.